Welcome to the Business Behind Fundraising podcast, where you'll discover how to raise the kind of money your big vision requires without adding more events, appeals, or grant applications. Learn how to stop blocking overall revenue growth and start attracting investment-level donors with Sherry Quam Taylor.
Hey guys, I'm so excited for you to hear from my colleague, Maiya Holliday, today. Mainly because she's been in your shoes. She has worked for nonprofits. She's scaled nonprofits, and she is a self-taught coder, which is like baffling to me because my kids take coding classes in high school, and I'm like, what in the world are you even doing? So I was impressed when she told me she actually is self-taught. She runs a big business these days. She's a B Corp. She's working with purpose-driven organizations and change makers all over the globe. She's been all over the globe, which I feel like has maybe given her a really unique angle and really brings that to the table when she's designing websites and other assets for organizations. So take a listen. And I loved what she said about, hey, if you've done the one-off website and you've been putting off like, okay, the Let's Get Real website, this is an investment. She's your gal. So enjoy the episode. Maiya, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's so nice to see you and have this time to catch up.
Yeah, so glad to do it. Okay, so we have lots to cover today, and I hopped, of course. Obviously, I've been on your website and LinkedIn, and we're old friends over there. But I did screenshot your header over into my notes here because I loved your little tagline that said, "Websites that make it easier for good people to do great work," which I think is a great line, and B just summarizes all of our conversations we've had together. So why don't you set the stage for us? Tell us about yourself. Tell us about Mangrove. How'd you get here? Like lay out what your team is, what they do, and we'll start there.
So Mangrove was really born out of a desire to use my creative and technical skills to support organizations doing progressive work. And so the way that came about is I actually studied international development. I thought I was going to go into some sort of public policy or public health related field. At some point, I realized that it just wasn't feeling like the right path, and it wasn't feeling like my skills were really well aligned with the potential next steps there. And so I was actually working for a nonprofit right out of college and was doing a number of different things. They were organizing volunteer trips to Thailand and Tanzania to do HIV/AIDS education and sustainable agriculture training. And what I was seeing there is that the model, it was like a volunteer vacation model. It felt a little arm's length of actually really having an impact. But what I did recognize while I was there is that there were some nonprofit organizations on the ground who needed some sort of like digital or website support. And at the time I had just been learning about it on my own and doing a little bit of work on the website for the nonprofit that I was working for, and realized that I actually really enjoyed doing that. So I ended up kind of just helping a couple folks there who I had met in Tanzania, and was able to set up like a small donation page for one of them and a couple other little things. And that felt so much more tangible to me. And so at that point, I realized that doing website development and, I had started coding a little bit, and following that path felt like a much more direct way for me to have an impact, and that I actually really wanted to use my skills to support other organizations. And I was able to use technology, which is really translatable to all these different organizations, and just use it to support them. And so in 2009, I established Mangrove Web. I was just a freelancer at the time and was coding and partnering with other designers that I was building kind of small nonprofit sites for. And I was actually living in Panama at the time and working from a little co-working space on an island that a colleague of mine had set up, and was working like literally in in the midst of thousands of mangroves. And so I took a picture of this little mangrove tree kind of sprouting out of the ground. That became our first logo. But the more I've learned about mangroves over time, the more applicable it is. Like they kind of are all over the world, and we have a very global team, and they are this like kind of structural support between land and water, and support all these organisms living within them, and are this ecosystem in the roots themselves. And all of that felt like it resonated so much with what we were doing by kind of creating this infrastructure for organizations to kind of grow and thrive and, live out of there. So now we are a 24-person team. We have about 8 folks in the US, 6 in Canada. We have a Canadian entity that we set up in January. And then the rest of the team is mostly in Europe and South America. Some of those are United States travelers who have been living abroad for many years, and some are local to each of those places.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You were doing the pandemic work from Panama or work from anywhere in the globe before the pandemic, I guess is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
You're a trendsetter.
We've always been remote. And so it was interesting through the pandemic because it was one of those moments where I didn't realize how different or how much went into, establishing a whole remote team, because we had just been doing it the whole time. And so while the pandemic was going, we just kind of kept showing up the way we had been showing up, and already had so many things digitally documented. We're already meeting online, had already created all of our systems. So we just kind of kept cruising along. But it's interesting to see how the world has shifted more to remote work, and how
we caught up with you.
Yeah, we're kind of like, okay, we'll just carry on doing what we've been doing for the last decade.
Yeah. Watch and learn, America.
Yeah, but part of that is because my husband's Australian, and I actually lived in Australia for a couple of years, and like I've been very location agnostic. We live in California and Truckee now, but I spent a lot of time traveling and working, and so we picked up a lot of folks along the way, and just made sure that we could connect in close enough time zones.
I love it. True global leader and global business owner. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're running this big team. I'm so excited to hear about the types of work that you're doing. Could you talk a little bit about the fact that you are a woman-owned B Corp? I just love to. I've been so interested in that part of your journey, and could you just talk a little bit about like why you did that, what that looks like, and what that really means to your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So we became a certified B Corp in 2017. We applied in 2016. No, in 2016 we became a certified B Corp. The big benchmarks are 2016 B Corp, 2017 I had my first kid. So
you always know
moments in time. And so we being a B Corp it's a certification. It's a commitment to doing business in a socially and environmentally responsible way. And so there's a point system. You have to get a certain number of points in order to qualify, and you can kind of focus your accumulation of points on different buckets. And so they're actually shifting some of the qualifications where there's more points that are required. But up until this point, you can kind of choose where you want to really invest in your business, and have to have a pretty decent baseline of points across all of the different categories, which are governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. And so it's a pretty rigorous certification. You recertify every 3 years. It's kind of like the fair trade certification of business, but is wider reaching. And it's for any for-profit businesses to really have a seal of approval saying that they are really committed to doing business in a conscientious way.
So that makes total sense. Tying to the niche that you serve and type of client you serve. So you're designing, to correct me here, you're designing websites for other B Corps as well, just mission aligned organizations, nonprofits. Like, what is your clientele? Who's your perfect client? Obviously you have a lot of nonprofits listening to this podcast, but talk to me a little bit about who you're serving.
Yeah, so we're serving small and medium businesses across, not just B Corps, definitely nonprofits, any organizations that kind of categorize themselves as purpose driven. I know that can be wide ranging, but we really do exist in order to support organizations that are doing good work in the world and to amplify those organizations and allow them to do their work better. We also work with a lot of like purpose driven startups, and anyone who's working to make the world a little bit better, we want to support. So
when people reach out to you, like, it's like, is it really like, hey, we need a new website? Or what would you say is the, I'm going to say the exact problem they're trying to solve? Or maybe from your angle, that client that you're like, oh my gosh, like I can, that is my sweet spot. Like that, you're so excited to get on the phone with them. Like, what are you really listening for in that first call?
For me, I actually do think that most folks that reach out do know that they need a new website and are at that point in which they're very directly asking for a new website or a rebrand. We do full design services now as well, which was part of our acquisition in January. Our sweet spot is really working with organizations that usually have a marketing person in-house. They're have a marketing budget established and are sort of past that initial tiny first website and are in a stage in which they're usually rebuilding and want to and understand the value of having a website that can support them to just do their work more efficiently and reach a wider audience and connect to their audience and inspire engagement. And so a lot of times what I see is folks who are coming to us and their organization, it has surpassed their website. And so the work that they're actually doing is so incredible, but it's not being reflected and communicated on their website, or there's a range of things that they're doing that are some sort of like manual data entry, or they just don't have the flexibility to create new landing pages or new areas of the site. And so often the marketing person feels somewhat constrained and really can't, knows all these things that they can do to further the work and the mission of the organization, but their hands are a bit tied. And so we usually come in and want to build something that really enables them to just expand their reach and, reach whatever goals that they've established. And we can hopefully create pathways to do that and alleviate some time and constraints from that person.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes I do, like when people reach out to me to talk, of course I'll hop on their website, they're $9.90, all the things, do all the research. But I do find that I feel like sometimes their websites are really underselling their missions.
Yeah.
Where I think like, oh my gosh, that's incredible what you're talking about. Like I didn't really get that from the website.
Exactly.
And I made some, you probably see that. I made some gutsy, bold, I don't know, maybe it was, I guess, statement. I was talking about it on LinkedIn, which I know we are engaging on LinkedIn together, but I made some comment like, I think every nonprofit that comes across my plate really should be adding about $100,000 to $300,000 to their marketing budgets. And people like fell off their chair. Yeah, people fell off their chair. I think the original client I said that to fell off his chair. But it's for what you just, I see people being irrationally frugal in this area. Where it's like, well, such and such's daughter could do the graphics, or my cousins, whatever can do, the graphics, and that's just not helping them grow. That's not, putting gasoline in their engine that really will allow them to scale their organization.
I think sometimes you can think of that situation kind of like fast fashion, where I would obviously like not everyone has a budget on hand that they can just throw at something. But if there is a possibility to put more dollars towards rebuilding a website and doing a really thorough job of it, it can really last for a lot longer. It can really propel your organization forward. It can pay for itself. And so if you're kind of like going a more scrappy route and just kind of pulling things together and not fully thinking through the content strategy and the storytelling and the infrastructure and the way that it can support you and the data capture and all of those things, you're doing your organization a disservice by just having like a Band-Aid or stopgap solution that kind of like is where you're limping along. And I see it more as like back to the fast fashion piece, like invest in something that costs a little bit more, but it's going to last and it's going to be better quality and it's created with I don't know, more intention and ethical practices behind it, and allow that, invest in it. And so you have a really robust tool that's going to last for years and it's really going to support your business versus just putting a little bit of money towards something that kind of works, because you can go either way. And I understand sometimes when folks need to start smaller and there are some other solutions. But I do see that, we put a lot of effort into building sites that will be a useful tool and that will, support you for the foreseeable future and that you can really get the most out of it. So there is, a return on that investment and it's worth putting those dollars in.
Yeah, because it's really, yes, it's an expense, but I mean, I would be looking at it as it's actually a revenue generator if we let it be. So like you said, it will pay for itself, and just to be confident that we're making that investment and that not only probably the functionality of the site and the giving and pages, which I'm always concerned about, but I also find that then your donors and your funders and your partners actually see you differently and they understand your mission and they're understanding your story in a deeper way. And I really think it's a level setting opportunity for people to see you, whether it's bigger, whether it's better, or whether it's, I don't know, worthy of investing in is critical.
In a lot of cases, it's the first impression for folks of like who you are, how you present yourself, how you do things. And so it's an important moment in which people make really quick decisions without even recognizing what their, subconscious bias is, and folks are deciding whether or not you seem legitimate. And also, there's just, with so many great websites out there and so much engagement, like if folks are kind of stuck on something or if one thing doesn't work, like people just bounce and kind of give up and have no attention span or patience for things not working. And it's kind of a bummer because not everything is always perfect. I mean, I've even had, we've all experienced Google or Slack having that one crazy day that they went down. And so not everything's going to be perfect all the time, but we do want to make sure that the user experience is great and that folks are really able to quickly get where they need to go so we don't interrupt their user journey, and we make sure that they remain engaged and like keep that momentum of whatever they're connecting to on your site, and making sure that follows through to them donating or getting more information or reaching out or whatever it is.
Love it. So you mentioned this, you've this other business you acquired, which is so fun. Bringing more assets, I guess, more other design services, I guess you said.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like what does that look like holistically? I mean, annual reports, emailers, newsletter, like give me the soup to nuts on what you're doing for organizations.
Yeah. So before the acquisition, we had just more development resources than design resources. And we had often partnered with different design firms, which we still do, to do more full service or larger projects. And so there was another B Corp firm called Mangrove that's in Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. And we had worked with them for a couple of years, had a great experience. And they approached us and said, like, hey, would you like to join forces more formally and just merge and become a larger organization with more design capacity? And so basically we now have more capacity to do full service branding and identity work, and also to do print or non-web digital design work like annual reports. We've done a lot of annual reports for nonprofits, both in a website format and PDF format. We don't do as much like one-off, like smaller print work, but so it's mostly digital design. But the folks from the Mangrove board team also have a lot of deep-seated experience in digital and design accessibility. So they're bringing that. We have some expertise on our team, but we're really digging into that more, especially with their years of experience with designing more accessible websites and products.
Yeah, I loved when you mentioned that to me when we were chatting ahead. Could you just talk to me about like what does that look like? And you were saying that Canada was a little bit ahead, or maybe is a little bit ahead of the U.S. in this area. Like, how are you balancing? I think it's kind of like, well, it can either look good or it's accessible, but I think we can do both, or you're doing both. But can you talk to me, like, what does that look like? And what are those kind of functional, or what's the functionality that you're laying on top of websites then?
I think it's a bit of like a urban myth that you can either have beautiful design or an accessible website, and
it's like healthy food doesn't taste good. It's like
exactly
the same like, urban myth.
Yeah. And so I am learning more and more about this every day, and learning from my team members and other sources as well. But what I do know very distinctly is that you can still create amazing designs with while maintaining full digital accessibility. One thing about it, I mean, there's the common things that a lot of people have heard about with like color contrast or font size or being able to click on buttons and things like that. But there's a lot of under the hood work too, or just more structural pieces to it that actually don't negatively affect the design at all. It's just about the way you organize data. And so if someone is using a screen reader, for example, and moving through your site, the screen readers are taught to move from H1 to H2 and then the content to H3. And so you just need to make sure that the hierarchy of the information on the page, it makes sense to a screen reader. And then, the calls to action, that they have labels that are not just all learn more. If someone's tabbing through a site, they might get disoriented by just hearing a call to action that says learn more, because it's like learn more about what. They can't see that CTA is connected to this content. So learn more about sustainability, or learn more about our services. There's a lot of little tricks like that actually are just great for all users.
Everybody, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of pieces to designing for accessibility that really are just an extension of great UX. And so UX is, creating user experience that's easy to use, easy to navigate, guides users through your site without any hiccups. And digital accessibility really, from an aesthetic point, is kind of just an extension of that, and just kind of a graceful degradation, which is what we say in coding, like it gracefully degrades. So it's like accessibility might be this really high level of implementing all of these things, and then UX is just the natural fallback that you would have designed to, that was like just right behind that. And the other thing and then there's just a lot of other hooks and things we put in the code that help folks. But I've seen some incredible design work come out of our team that's fully accessible, and we're really actually moving towards designing and building all sites to be at least level A accessibility. This is coming down the pipeline in Canada. Is becoming a requirement in the next in 2024, I believe. And then in California, there's actually requirements already for government institutions. And I think that we'll see this become more prevalent and more required. sooner rather than later. I'm not exactly sure what the implementation or
like when the mandate
like
would,
what the exact requirements or blowback will be if your site isn't fully compliant, and how they're going to determine that. But I know that this will become more and more of a mainstream requirement in the near future.
So good. I mean, it only makes sense. It's a little bit like, even the American with Disabilities Act of like clearance at doors for people who are in wheelchairs. Like, it actually helps all of us if it's designed well.
Yeah, exactly. So like now I know
if we're carrying something heavy, or
or if you have a stroller, you realize that that's actually really necessary. There's a graphic that always just resonates with me in terms of understanding designing for accessibility. And there's a you can talk about disabilities in terms of permanent disabilities, temporary or situational. And so you can imagine someone with like one arm who's going to open a door, and maybe they're holding something as well. And so maybe there's a foot pedal to open the door, and they can open it. And then and then there's someone with a broken arm who is, at that time having the same experience for some temporary period of time, but in that moment needs the same tools. And then there's someone like holding a baby. And that's a situational thing where, you can't just throw the baby down and grab whatever you need. And so
you could, but
you realize how many of these things are really just benefiting everyone, and that it doesn't have to, you don't have to sacrifice the integrity of the design or the product or anything. If you're thoughtful and creative about the way that you're designing and building these things, like it just really opens up to a wider audience and is just better and easier to use.
I've learned so much. I'd be curious to know, in the back end. Now I don't know anything about coding, so help me with this question I'm asking. But my mom has to use voice activation for her phone and her iPad, and she's in a wheelchair, and I've just been so impressed, because I'd never used it before, and so I turned it on. I was like, we got to learn how to use this so we can support my mom. But the voice activation and the controls and just what happens on the back end of a website, I mean, you can kind of see it when you're using it, but I think the normal person has never had to use that, or the average everyday person. It is beyond technical of just that back end interface. But as a person whose mother, like her, depends on it, oh my gosh, this is just so interesting to me when we spoke for that reason.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's so many tools out there. Obviously, like your iPhone allows you to do voice texting or use Siri and things like that. So there's a lot of things that are already built that we as developers are maybe hooking into by putting some of the infrastructure on the back end of the site. Like, the work we're doing is just allowing folks who have screen readers set up to use our sites more fluidly. And there's a lot of different instances where there's technology that exists that someone might be employing everywhere. And we just want to make sure we're aligning with it, and the website is aligning with it so that they can use those tools really effectively.
Okay, so tell me, as we kind of look ahead here to wrap up, maybe give me a case study or just a client that you've loved working with, and just the journey that you've taken them on, and just what your process has been with them.
Sure. Two that stand out recently that are nonprofits are the Tipping Point Community, which is a Bay Area-based nonprofit, and Sierra Club Canada. For both, I'll walk through our process because it's similar for both. But usually for anyone, we start with a really thorough interview of like who they are and what the goals are and audience, and look into their competitors and kind of map out the functional and technical requirements. We really want to understand like who the organization is and what their values are and how they want and need to present themselves to the world, and also make sure we're assessing really deeply like what the audience needs to get out of the website, and making sure that, the strategy document that comes out of that is really the cornerstone for everything that follows for the content design and dev, where we're making sure that we're honoring the heart of the organization and making sure that it's really authentically communicated through the story on the site. And then we're making sure that we're keeping our eye on what the actual goals of the users are and making sure that their needs are met, because and that really helps when we're in a situation where there's like a lot of disparate views on design or different feedback. We always want to make sure we map back to what are the goals and like who are we serving and how are we serving them, and are we doing that in a way that's in line with like what this organization is and stands for, but really delivering what the audience needs. And then we go through the current website and brand standards and do a deep dive into everything that exists, and then kind of translate that. I know a friend of ours talks about like strategic listening. Like we're doing a lot of strategic listening. And I think anyone in a service-based business does that. I know you do on a widespread level. And then we're basically translating that into our own, using our own expertise, translating that into a structure of the website. So a content outline, which is kind of like a blueprint of the website, really making sure that we're getting all of the details of the story in place and making sure that everything that we need to talk about has an appropriate place and has some visibility. And then designing around that and making sure that everything that we heard about the organization is translated, into these modalities. And so the design follows the content strategy. Often we'll do kind of high level content strategy for clients. We'll map out, a blueprint or an outline of what the content needs to be. We'll give advice on how long and what type of content need to be in each place, and folks can fill that in themselves, or they can do full copywriting services. But it's really important to have clarity on what that story is, make sure that connects to users, and then to design around that. And to use then the design as a tool, as really a way to present that information in a way that resonates with your users and that's easy to digest, and that really like is kind of like a tunnel, to your users rather than just garnish. We're using the design to deliver that information. And, we map the design back to the preferences and design aesthetic of the organization, and also, what the users need. And then, we move into development. We build a lot of websites on WordPress. We also use Webflow and a couple other headless platforms and different systems. But we want to also, like, while we're building, just understand what the needs of the organization are, who's going to be editing, who's going to be using the site, and how can we build tools on the back end so that we can ensure that this is really useful and powerful for whoever is editing it. So we do training manuals and all of that. We want our clients to just be able to focus on the content and not have to worry about maintaining the integrity of the design or structure of the site. Like, you shouldn't be able to break it, but you should have a lot of flexibility. And then we lastly want to make sure that all the data connects with whatever systems you're using, whether it's pulling like form data into your CMS or donation system, or, rerouting folks, being able to capture someone who maybe falls off your contact form on the early stages and needs follow-up, whatever it is. I don't want anyone on your team to be doing any extra data handling if they don't need to.
Yeah, all the fundraising staff members who also do Marcom and website are like cheering you on right now.
Yeah,
because they don't have time to do all that.
We want to make your lives better, I promise. But for Tipping Point, I was actually just chatting with one of our SEO partners, and we launched 3 months ago. We had like rebuilt the whole system. It's a pretty robust website. They've I won't go into details. You can look at it. It's at tippingpoint.org. But their bounce rate is down 62%.
Wow.
Folks are spending 30 more seconds on the site per session. And there's an increase of 36% pages viewed per session. So folks are spending more time on the site and engaging more and digging into whatever the stories are there. And, I don't have the data on hand of any donation conversions, but that data in itself of folks just staying there and exploring and engaging with the site for longer is pretty significant.
Maiya, how can people find you? What's the best way to reach you if they're hearing you and saying like, oh my gosh, the project we've been putting off is 2024 is our year.
Yeah, now's the time.
Now's the time.
Our website is mangrove-web.com. And my email is Maiya@Mangrove, Maiya. But feel free to reach out. Our contact form if you fill it out, will then lead you into our web inquiry form. And that's really the best way to get started because it gives us a lot of detailed information about your project. Then we can set up a call and really have a more effective conversation about what your needs are. And any inquiries that come in, if they're not quite the right fit, we always really do try to make good referrals too. So reach out if you're thinking about it. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Maiya Holliday, and I'm doing my best to post there frequently.
I was going to say, don't forget to give LinkedIn a shout out.
Yeah. No, LinkedIn is a good place to find us as well. So please reach out and connect and chat me up there.
Good. Thanks for your time, Maiya. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sherry. It was so nice to be here with you.
Thanks for listening to the Business Behind Fundraising podcast. Tune in weekly, and you'll get seriously good at fully funding your organization's big vision year after year. Yes, even your overhead. Visit www.quamtaylor.com. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.